Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our DFS and betting preview for this week's Cognizant Classic. Gonna get you guys ready for all of your exposure. With first off, a look at my modeling and how I'm using the stats to identify my top plays this week. We'll talk through some of those key metrics as well as some comp courses that I'm using for comparison. And then afterwards, we'll shift our focus over there to our exposure, both on the DFS angle and for our outright betting card with that top 6 plays of the week. Because it is my hometown event, I'll be there, boots on the ground the entire week. Gonna add in a few extra plays over here to this video, give you guys a good idea for not only what I'm looking for in players, but also a few examples of how to utilize those kind of stats. So by the end, you'll have a good idea of how to attack your exposure. So without further ado, let's go ahead and hop on in and try and make it another sweat on top of Pot Guider from last week. While it would have been great to go out there and get them home for the outright, we did end up having a really good DFS week with plenty of our outrights, core plays, and values up there towards the top. So let's try and run it back, make it 2 good weeks in a row. Started off with, first off, a look at our modeling and our key stats around PGA National. PGA National was one of the hardest tracks that we had on tour. That, of course, was before they changed it from a par 70 to par 71. Because they took 10 and changed it from a par 4 to par 5, now it's going to play a lot more under par, and especially with how wet it's going to be this year. If you guys didn't see my course breakdown already, I'll put it down in the description of the video, but it's going to be rainy over here on Monday and Wednesday, and it's going to make the golf course pretty soft, at least early on. And if we don't have a bunch of wind like we've had the last few years, it's going to play to a -1, maybe even a better scoring average. So maybe not quite the grind fest that we always see, but when we get those afternoon winds pretty much every single day, if we maybe get a little bit more blustery conditions over the weekend, could end up playing like a pretty hard golf course out there. So a lot of it does come down to the weather, but we have a pretty good gauge on what it plays other than that. So in terms of your approach profile, you're looking at a mid to short iron golf course, a lot coming from 125 to 175. So last week we were looking at a lot from 175 to 225. It's going to be coming from the shorter end of the spectrum this week. Now, it's not a lot from 50 to 125 because a lot of the holes force you to lay up when they are shorter par 4s. You're not going to have a lot of flip wedges into these greens, but these mid-tier range, specifically these 2 categories right here, are where you're going to see extra emphasis in my modeling. Off the tee, it is more of a positional golf course, so still looking at some off the tee stuff heading in, but good drive percentage, also your driving accuracy over the last 48 rounds, going to give us a good idea of players that can plot themselves around a course with all this water. Bogey avoidance, important at a track with all these ticking time bombs. Around the green, important if the winds really do kick up. Also adding in some Bermuda grass baseline because we're down here in Florida. But over here in Bet the Number, they were looking at par 3 scoring, which a little bit of a shout out to them out here for this key stat. This was taken directly from their model this week. So, I've been to this event 6 years straight at this point. I've played plenty of rounds around PGA National, and it never really occurred to me that the par 3s are the pivotal holes, but they are, right? You've got 2 in the bear trap, among the most difficult on all the PGA Tour. Heck, even number 7 on the front 9 tends to be extremely difficult. They're holes that you have to go out there and take advantage of if you're going to go out there and be that ultimate champion. So I love what they were doing there. Went so much so, went out there and threw it in my own model. So of course, the sponsor of this video here is the Bet the Number site. So make sure to check them out if you guys haven't already. Your putting is a little bit de-emphasized around PGA National. Now, if it's going to be a birdie fest this year, let's say it's calm all 4 days, I would have to re-emphasize the putting here, but most years it's towards the bottom of my emphasis. And then in terms of your putting or your comp courses down here, you've got 4 that I went out there and mixed in. You've got the Fedex St. Jude, Players, RBC Heritage, and Sony Open as tournaments. A lot of them, though, higher level fields where you're not going to see a lot of these mid to lower tier players. So I kind of prefer ones like the Heritage, where a few years ago you were seeing mid-level fields, but the Sony Open's the one out of these 4 courses where you're getting a mid to lower tier field every single year. So probably the best one to go out there and use for comps, but all shorter tracks, more about that positioning off the tee, with mid to even shorter iron play being the key. So a lot of crossover that you can find at a lot of those events. And overall, we're not looking for a player that bombs it like we did last week. Right? Last week, it was pretty clear that we wanted guys with high ball speed, guys that could hit the the ball a long way, take advantage of the par fives. This time around, it's a second shot golf course. Now, if you're a bomber and you have the second shot working, you can go out there and still get the job done. Like, we've had guys like JT and Rory win at this golf course before. However, the guys that tend to be very accurate with their second shot also a lot of times tend to be the more accurate players off the tee. And because it's not a 7,800 yard golf course, it's a lot more towards the shorter end of the spectrum. Your guys that have that positional skill set have a lot better chance around a PGA National. So that's why the model is skewed in that direction. And on top of that, we want guys that avoid the big mistakes. That's why we're looking at bogey avoidance. It's why we're looking at stats like around the green and guys that can scramble themselves out of trouble. So that being said, now we know what to go out there and look for in potential plays. Let's translate that into some of our exposure. First up, we've got Sepp Straka, who I think is going to be going under the radar a bit this week, which is kind of funny to say considering that he won outright just a few weeks ago, but he did have the missed cut at the Genesis, which I think is going to sour some people, but remember that that is about the opposite of what we have for this week, right? Deep rough around Torrey Pines, a kind of golf course where you have to be a bomber off the tee. Sepp Straka, more of that positional kind of player, and we mentioned that we were looking for during those key stats. So, I'll forgive and forget a little bit when it comes to that form, because if you take a look at him before that, it was a 15th at Waste Management, a T7 over there at Pebble, just a few weeks after he won at the Amex. So he didn't have much of a hangover right after having that win with these two top 15 finishes. And I think some people might be thrown off by that Genesis, but just remember that it was a completely different style golf course. So, if we take a look at the form, you'll see why a Sepp Straka would make sense. He's gaining in 2 out of the 4 categories, and it's the 2 ball striking categories that we see him going out there and gaining in. So exactly what we'd be hoping to see out there in some of our plays. And at 25-1, it is a short number, but that's the only short number I'm planning on playing this week. And if he is going to be a little bit overlooked, there's a chance that in DFS, he's about average, maybe even below average ownership for this range, which I think would be wild when you look at some of the names you're comparing them to. But I think Taylor Pendrith with his form will at least get some eyes. Like, a Sun GM is usually really chalky at this sort of event, so I could see him getting far more ownership than somebody like a Sepp Straka here. And heck, even Denny McCarthy, after his really good form over the last few starts, might get more attention than a Sepp Straka here, which if you take a look at the outright odds in this range, right, he's got the best outright odds of really anyone around him. And I think there's a chance in DFS that he gets less attention than some of the other guys around him. So I think at DFS, he might even be a better play than what he is for an outright bet, but the exact kind of player that we're looking for at this kind of golf course. A gainer on Bermuda grass long term, a former champion around this golf course as well. And if we take a look at his performances here, did miss the cut his last time here, but remember that Austin Eckroat missed the cut the year before he went out there and won last year. So, obviously has the T5, the win the year before that. So, the cut isn't that big a deal when you have that kind of form around it. But even if you are looking for outright bets, DFS plays this week, you don't have to have good course history. You had Eric Cole nearly win this in his first time around here. You have guys that have had missed cut, and then go out there in top 5 out of nowhere around a PGA National, because you have all the water in play, so much variance involved when you have that kind of setup. If you're just even slightly off when it comes to your form heading in, it could really expose you around a PGA National. So, a Sepp Straka, the exact kind of player that we're looking for, accurate off the tee, hits a bunch of greens, and is kind of being slept on, and I hope that remains the case as the week goes on. Next up, we got a little bit of a side play, a little bonus bet over here with Jordan Spieth. So he's $8,600. I will be playing him out there in a few lineups. I'm not going to spend that much time on it, but he was 40-1 on books, which I just thought was absolutely disrespectful. And you guys know I'm a huge Jordan Spieth stan, so probably not a surprise that you see me with the outright bet here. But at the Waste Management Phoenix Open, he had that top 5 finish, and that was a field with guys like Scotty Scheffler, a bunch of elite tier talents out there in that kind of field. This is a much lower tier field. I mean, your top tier player is Russell Henley up there at the top end of the board, right? He was nowhere near the top end of the board over there at Waste Management. So, if you get top 5 there, this is a better course fit than Waste Management as well. Right? This isn't an off the tee heavy course. This is all about that second shot. And ever since having that surgery, Jordan Spieth has looked quite a bit better over there with his iron play. So it's a little bit of a sprinkle bet. I went with a lot more than a sprinkle because I am such a huge fan and he's going to be here at my home tier event. But, in the past, he's played really well at the Cognizant when he's teed it up here. Not a huge sample size around the Honda Classic back in the day, but in that small sample size is absolutely crushed. So he's going to have to hit some fairways. Driving accuracy is going to be the X factor for him, but from fairway in, checks a lot of those boxes that we're looking for. Next up, we got Ben Griffin, so this will be our actual core play number 2. So yeah, like I said, just Jordan Spieth, a little bit of a homer play there, but always going to give that little bit of a asterisk when I give that kind of play. Ben Griffin, though, really fits this kind of golf course. So if you take a look at the event history, you'll see what I'm talking about with him. He did miss the cut last year, but T21 the year before that. In the course, the recent form is why I think he's such a good course fit. Gaining over 0.7 shots gained approach per round. Gaining in all 3 tee to green categories. Even if you zoom out a little bit and you give him a larger sample size, he's still gaining across all 3 tee to green categories. And most importantly, with the Ben Griffin, this is the sort of player that you play at positional golf courses. He doesn't have the kind of power to go out there and overpower a Genesis, to go out there and really win at major championship sort of venues. And that's why he had to switch to the Max Fly golf ball. I think it was a little bit controversial when he went out there and changed to it, right? He went from a traditional Titleist ball out there to a less spin golf ball so that he could try and get some extra rollout. That tells us that that was really the big weakness of his game. And while he's gotten a little bit of extra power after doing so, when you get him at a golf course where he doesn't have to worry about all that, that is massive out there for his chances. So at 50 to 1, by the way, Jordan was at 40 to 1. We got that outright bet. 50 to 1, I thought it was worth a shot in this kind of field. The course history, right, wasn't elite by any means, but remember that guys like Austin Eckroat just went out of nowhere and won around this kind of event. And just to show you what I'm talking about here with an Austin Eckroat, right, missed cut, hadn't even played here before that, and then goes out there and wins. So at T21, right, he's already got a leg up off of somebody like Eckroat last year. And my one concern with him would be the fact that he's playing so much golf this time of year. If you take a look at it, right, he's played pretty much every single week, but he did that last year as well, and he was able to sustain a lot of his form. So I don't know if it's as big of an issue. It's kind of like an Eric Cole who plays every single time that he can. If this was somebody like a Hideki, maybe like a Justin Thomas, he was playing 4 or 5 weeks in a row, it might raise a little bit more of a red flag. But in terms of the course fit, he does everything that we want to. You play him at those positional sort of golf courses. In those mid irons from 125 to 175 are also a huge positive for Ben Griffin. And I think really the cherry on top here as well, you can tell just the model loves a Ben Griffin this week. He's also really good on Bermuda grass. He gains 0.65 shots gained putting per round on Bermuda, which is 0.8 strokes better per round than his 24-round baseline, which if we go back to that 24-round baseline, he's losing nearly 0.2 strokes per round when it comes to the greens. If he can go back to gaining nearly 0.7 strokes per round, I mean, that'd be a massive turnaround for somebody like a Ben Griffin. So you can see the projection there at over a 75-point projection. I mean, that's almost close to where I have Sepp Straka, and Sepp Straka is $9,400. So really good in terms of that points per dollar value. Might carry some ownership in DFS, but you can afford to do that in a few spots. And Ben Griffin just might be one of those conviction plays for me. Next up, we got Kurt Kitayama here at $8,300. Kurt Kitayama was in contention at this event a few years ago. If you guys don't remember, was the leader through 36 holes, I believe. Ended up finishing third back there 3 years ago. But Kurt Kitayama just cannot buy a putt for his life recently. If we take a look at the form, you'll see he's gaining into 3 tee to green categories, but losing 0.7 strokes per round with the putter, which can be a problem out there for Kurt. But if there's one surface where he's better out there on the PGA Tour, it has been on Bermuda grass, where you can see he's slightly into the positive, which I know doesn't look like a massive positive or massive, source of optimism, but compared to that 24-round baseline, that's nearly 0.4 strokes better per round. So, I know we have a low expectation out there for Kurt Kitayama, but find me a surface where he's anywhere into the positive, and I'm going to be a buyer on him long term. And it's not even just here where he's had some of that form. He went out there, he won at the API, which is another course with Bermuda grass from tip to tip. A little bit of a different test with the ball striking, more of that heavy rough like we kind of have at the Genesis, but this kind of golf course is less demanding when it comes to the off the tee play. So, if he can go out there, beat a signature level field when it comes to this kind of agronomy, he can win at a golf course that's less demanding when it comes to that off the tee. What we really need from Kurt is a spike performance over there with the putter, and pretty much all of those out there in the PGA Tour for him have been out here on Bermuda grass. And if he could do that, he could see himself out there into contention in a 50 50 to 1, I thought was worth a sprinkle out there for an outright. So in DFS, I think he's an even better play than what we have for the outright here. Guys like Ben Griffin, I could see him getting some ownership, maybe being around 15%. Kurt Kitayama, I've got living in that 10 to maybe 12% range at the very most. So, a step down with the ownership, might even be single digit owned if some of the other guys around him are garnering some steam, which I would absolutely love over there, as he's my number 12 ranked play when it comes to the long-term fit. Guys like a Ben Griffin are better with the recent form. Jordan Spieth, terrible play, by the way, when it comes to the stats. That's part of the reason that he wasn't one of our official plays there. Sepp Straka, more of a well-balanced play. You can see number 10 when it comes to the long-term stats. Kurt Kitayama is the kind of guy where the more we zoom out there on his stat profile, the better he looks at this sort of event, which can be a little bit dangerous around a course like this with all that kind of water. But lately, right, the issue's been the putter lately, right? His tee to green lately has still been well into the positive, right into the positive in all three of those categories. So he's got to flip that putter. And if he could do it out there at Bermuda grass, I love his chances out there this week. Before we talk about our last 4 plays, one will be another bonus bet, and also our 3 values down towards the bottom. I want to remind you guys where you can find these sheets for yourself. That, of course, would be over there on my Patreon page, which you can find in the description of this video. Down there on my Patreon page, which is $15 a month, you get access to all of my sheets out there for main slate every single week, as well as out there for rounds 2 through 4 on Showdown. So if you've been wondering where you can find all my bets, my entire player pool out there for every single slate, you can find that over there on the Patreon page. Not only do I have all the stats, all the modeling out there for every single player in the field, but we've got recent form, event history, shots gained metrics, all of the modeling weights that I was showing you guys before, all completely uncensored. So everything that you see on here that is blacked out that you guys can't read on here is, of course, uncensored over there for my Patreon members. And unlike a lot of the other sites out here in the PGA DFS industry that, cost you an arm and a leg to go out there and join, my site, extremely affordable at $15 a month, which puts it at less than $1 a slate to go out there and get all your research and analysis. And I think at least I'm very partial to it, as I'm the creator out here of my site, but it has everything you guys need to go out there and get your research done in an expedited format. You're not going through stat after stat, website after website, trying to hunt down all these things that you're looking for. I aggregate it all together, give it to you in an easy to read format that should save you not only time, but also make your process more efficient. So make sure to check it out if you guys haven't already for all of my analysis this week. Next up, though, we got our next bonus bet. It'll be the last one that we have here this week. It's going to be Andrew Novak at plus 5,000. I am going to play him in some DFS lineups. Not sure about the ownership. The recent form ranking has me thinking that he's going to get some steam out there in lineups, but it probably won't be over like 10, maybe 12% ownership. And what I like with Andrew Novak is some of the course history here. He's played well in his small sample size, and the iron play, especially from the mid-tier iron range, has been really good over the last 24 rounds. So you can see here, right, gaining on approach, gaining close to a stroke per round with the putter. But even if we zoom out there in Andrew Novak, I mean, the guy's been striping it for pretty much the entire year. Best over there with the 2 short game categories, which is kind of what he's made his strength over the last 6 months. And if you take a look at the event history, you'll see that spike performance I'm talking about. The top 10 last year, top 30 finish out there the year before that. He's got some decent course history going here, and is the sort of player that on Bermuda grass has been a lot better than a lot of his other surfaces. Now you can see over here, over his recent stretch, he is losing strokes over here at Bermuda grass. But if you zoom out a little bit, the stats are more favorable over here on this putting surface. So, you're getting an informed player, the kind of guy that fits that approach profile that we're looking for. And it wouldn't surprise me for a shorter player off the tee like Novak to get his first tour win at this kind of venue. And what I really like is he played well at Torrey Pines when we played there for the 2 events over there at the West Coast swing. And that's a very off the tee heavy kind of golf course, which doesn't fit Andrew Novak's game. And you've got to think, if he could compete around a Genesis, imagine if he plays a golf course that's more suited towards his skill set. And that's what we're getting here. And a lot of those shots gained metrics, by the way, for him going out there gaining on approach, gaining in these 2 short game categories, were against elite tier signature level fields. And if they weren't, signature level fields, they were at least better tier fields like you had at the Farmers, where you had a lot more higher tier players than what you had for a week like this. So you get him in a weaker field event, and I think he has a really good opportunity to go out there and shine. So, $8,000, I think he's worth a few looks over there in DFS. But more importantly, from the outright perspective, I think has some upside out there in that market. First value play is going to be Billy Horschel here at 55 to 1. He's $7,900 in DFS, and the iron play lately is the cause for some optimism here, gaining over 0.8 strokes per round when it comes to the iron play, and that's even been with some missed cuts over his last 12 measured rounds. He's had a few ugly events where he's especially lost into two short game categories, which is kind of unlike Billy Ho. He's one of the best putters that we have out here on tour. In fact, if you take a look at his Bermuda grass stats, he's about a half a stroke better per round on Bermuda than what we've seen over his last 24 measured rounds. So that tells us that he's likely due for a little bit of putting regression to get better, right? Especially on a surface that he's so familiar on. And if he's in, by the way, those shots gained approach, if you take a look at the last 24 measured rounds, he's gaining a ton of strokes in that 125 to 175 range. Those two proximity buckets are where he's really gone out there and gaining strokes to the field, and that's exactly what we're looking for around a PGA National. So $7,900, I do think that he'll get some ownership just because this range all tends to get a little bit of steam, but because he's got the worst form, and I'll put that in quotes, worst form of anyone in this range, he's still gaining to the field. I mean, look at this, right? He's still gaining 0.3 strokes per round. So that's why I say worst form out there in quotes. He's going to be overlooked, maybe a little bit below that average ownership. So I could see people going to Smalley after that close finish, past champion Austin Eckroat, even a Novak that we just talked about, a little bit more than Billy Horschel. And considering that he has the best iron form out of any of those players, I think could be a little bit of a mistake. And the other thing to consider out here with any of these outright bets is that he's actually won before. He knows what it feels like when you go out there and get into contention, which is massive at a slapdick event like this. Like, there could be guys that go out there, get their name into the mix, that have no way to go out there and win when they get under the gun. They're just going to feel the nerves, go out there like a pot getter on Sunday and maybe choke a little bit. That's something you always have to consider out there with your bets. And with Billy Horschel, I don't have those kind of concerns because he's proven to us in the past that he has the stones to go out there and get the job done. Next up, we've got my favorite play of the week, at least when it comes to price. It's Luke Clanton, my boy. You guys know I'm close to him. He's from down here in South Florida, so a home game out here for my guy Luke. And he's 60 to 1 to go out here and win, which I thought was just absolutely disrespectful. And he's only $7,700 out there in DFS. Now, it's not a perfect course fit. He is a bomber off the tee, one of the longest players that you have in this kind of field, but he's my number 17 ranked play down here at number 25 in the pricing. And I don't care if it's not a perfect course fit for him. He's one of the best players in this field. He's at least a top 5 player in terms of talent level in this kind of field. And we're getting him in the 7K range, and you're getting him over, I thought, like 40 to 1 at most would be the kind of number we see on Luke Clanton. When I saw 60 to 1, I didn't run to go bet him. I sprinted to go out there and get in my bet on Luke Clanton. So let's go through the stats. Lately, it has been a little bit off the tee heavy, which is always going to be his calling card. So he's going to be limited in that capacity this week, but that power comes into handy with the second shot as well. He's going to be hitting shorter clubs into a lot of these greens. He knows the agronomy around here, right? He's from South Florida, from this specific area. So he knows how it plays this time of year. He plays down here all the time down here in South Florida. So around the green on Bermuda grass, he doesn't have a massive sample size, but it is well into the positive with his shots gained around the green. And you can see over here in terms of his shots gained putting on Bermuda grass, he's also better on this surface than what you've seen over his last 24 measured rounds, where you can see he's gaining about 0.3 strokes per round right there, which you would expect him to be better on this surface, right? If he's from here, this is where he grows up, he plays all of his golf, really solid ball striker. Really, the one thing that I was worried about would have been those middle iron ranges, but if you take a look at his shots gained approach from 125 to 175, those are by far his best ranges out there in the PGA Tour so far. So this might be a little bit of a match made in heaven, right? You get him at the course that emphasizes the two iron ranges he's the best at, and he's just one of the best players that we have in this kind of field. So DFS, I think he's a better play than an outright bet. You know, I am looking for more of those positional players at this sort of event, but when the price is right, and that's what you're getting here with the Luke Clanton, right? There can be exceptions to the rule. Like, for example, a Keith Mitchell has gone out here and had a lot of success around a Honda Classic. Outside of getting into contention, he's had multiple top 10 finishes over the last 3 years here. He's not that kind of guy you'd expect to have a lot of success at a positional golf course. Luke Clanton could be that same kind of player to go out there and get it done, which is why I'm using him out there in my outright card. And then our last play here is going to be Eric Cole down here at $7,200, who is somebody that I was on when he nearly won this thing as a complete unknown. And that was like the sweat of a lifetime, having a guy at 200 plus to 1 that nobody even knew the name of out there in contention. Was a whole lot of fun to say the least. This time around, he's out of form. So I don't know if I can go with a outright bet or anything, but this top 5 at nearly 20 to 1, I thought was an absolute steal. So if you take a look at the event history, you'll see what I'm talking about with Eric. He had that second place finish out there a few years ago, did miss the cut last year as chalk. So I don't know if a lot of people are going to go back out to an Eric Cole, but this is a positional golf course golfer to an absolute tee. He's not the best off the tee, really good with his second shot, and you play him at second shot golf courses. The iron play over the last 12 rounds hasn't been the best over there for Eric Cole, but you can see he's just slightly into the negative in that category. You go to the last 24 rounds, it does get a little bit more positive overall over there for Eric Cole, just slightly negative over there into the approach category. But on Bermuda grass has been an absolute killer for his career, gaining about 0.4 strokes per round, which is 0.75 strokes better per round than his 24 round baseline. So, you get him down here in Florida, you get him on these sort of golf courses, he's just going to go out there and putt the lights out. What we need him to do is gain with those middle irons. And just like a Luke Clanton, though the iron play hasn't been that great lately, if you zoom into just the 125 to 175 ranges, he's gaining well into the positive in those two categories. So it's a match made in heaven. That's why he had that top 5 finish there a few years ago. And the kind of player that I'll take a shot on for that top 20 at nearly 20 to 1. And out there in some DFS lineups where I think he could be sub 5 and for sure like sub 7% owned. Alrighty guys, that is all I've got for the DFS and betting preview this week. Before you hop on out of here, go ahead and smash that like button for me, and also comment down below who you've got as the winner for this golf tournament for a chance to earn a free month on my Patreon page. If you guys can give me the winner and they're at least 30 to 1 on all those major books, you will win a free access out there to all my projections and modeling for every single player in the field. As I mentioned before, the Patreon page is where you can find all of that data, so make sure to check it out if you guys haven't already, linked down below. But for a chance to earn that without having to pay for it yourself, make sure to go ahead, comment down below who you've got as that winner, and best of luck with all of your exposure this week, whether it's out there with your outrights or over there with your DFS lineups. I hope you go out there and take down all those kind of contests, and we can make the Cognizant Classic one to remember.